Okay, so now we can go ahead and start moving into the direction of defining events. And defining events is the process of associating a delegate with an event. Events are defined using event keyword, followed by our delegate, and then whatever name we want to give it. So it's event keyword, followed by the name of our delegate, and then whatever name we want to give it. Event has to be defined with delegate, otherwise it will not do anything. So events are friendly wrappers around delegates. I still can't fully understand why do we need them if we can just call delegate. I think it has to do something with event listeners, but I'll find out more. Although the delegates can be used on their own, they're typically used with events. Okay, they can be used on their own. Why are they typically used with events? Maybe just because it's a friendly wrapper. I don't know. I don't see how much friendlier it is. And the listeners can be attached to work performed event. I think that's the key, because listeners has to be attached to the event, not to the delegate. Behind the scenes, adding themselves to invocation list of the delegate handler. So listeners can attach to the event. So let's go ahead and define an event in the code really quick. So the first thing I'll do, I'll go ahead and add another class and call it worker. And then we'll go ahead and define a delegate here. We don't have to define delegate here, like he said, but we could define its own file somewhere else, but typically it seems to be a good idea to define it where we're going to be using it with our event. So we define our public delegate void work performed handler, which is going to be taking two arguments, int hours and work type. So now that we have the handler, we can go ahead and define our event using this handler. So what we do is we create public event, and then we have to assign the delegate name, work perform handler, and we just give the event name work performed. So now we went ahead and created the event and tied it to our delegate, so it's sort of like a wrapper around it. So then what we need to do is we need to go ahead and raise the event. So the next thing we need to learn is how to raise the event. So once we define events, we need to find ways to raise them. Events are raised by calling an event like a method, so they're called pretty much the same way as a delegate. And it's very important to first make sure that there's something in a location. If the delegate behind this event is null, there will be an error. So first thing that we need to do when we're trying to raise an event, to make sure that our delegate is not null, and then we call it just like a method. Another option is to get delegate from the event and cast it and call the method using that delegate, and this is how we use it to do it in our example. Right here. So let's go ahead and see how we could do that in the code. So in the code here, let's assume that we're going to have a method here, and we can call it do work, and this method is going to have, it's going to take the two parameters, and then what we're going to do, we're going to loop through each of our what we did every hour. It's funny, reference here is like micromanage it. So I want to know what you did every hour, and I want to do something. So this is where events come in perfect. So for every hour, report something here, and then when everything is over, report is done. So perfect way to use the events. So we could, I could raise the event right here, write the code here, but synthetically it's better, and functionally in the sense that, you know, we have to do some things such as check for the null, so it's better to create a method here. So we could create a method and call it on work performed, also void on work performed, and then this method right here raise the event here. So we're just naming the method on because that's a typical way of doing it in .NET for raising the event. So this method will raise the event, we'll call it from here for each one of our hours. But to raise the event, there are two ways of doing it. One way is to use the event. So we can say first check, like we said in notes, we check if, and then we use our event up there if work performed is not null, then work performed, and then do something here, like let's say 10 and work, or if we pass, actually we can pass here, and hour and work type, pass it in here. So let's send this integer hour every hour. So what I did every hour, maybe every day. So here we have now, we raised this event using our actual event, which is one of the techniques of doing it. Another technique of doing it is to cast our event back to delegate, and we can do that like this. We can say var del equals to work perform handler as work performed. Actually no, work performed, we are casting work performed as handler. So work performed as work performed handler. Now we have our delegate, and we can say delegate if, first of all we need to make sure if del is not null, then go ahead and del our work type. So very similar, except here we're casting delegate. And then a really interesting thing, since learning of this version, see they're putting here now that there's a delegate invocation can be simplified. So let's Control C here, comment that out, paste it back in, and it says it can be simplified, and it says it can be written like this. So this is a different syntax here. This part right here is being just casted right here, work performed as work performed handler. Question mark, invoke our work type. So it's using this invoke keyword to do it. So that's some kind of a newer syntax way of invoking a delegate, which is good to know. And so now we need to go ahead and raise the event for when it's done, and we could just use a built-in event in a .NET. Call it, it's event handler as a built-in delegate. Built-in event that just handles the events, and we call it work completed, and we want to create another method here on work completed. Oops, what is going on here? On work completed, which also takes the same, actually this one doesn't take any parameters, and then we can get rid of this because we can raise it our delegate way. And then we transfer our event handler here to our work completed. Event handler delegate to work completed event. So if delegate is not null, we can send here two parameters, this and event args empty, and then it gives us the same thing again. Preview changes, apply. So we have also this new syntax here. So now all we have to do here is just say on work performed, and we send I +1 since it's starting with 0 up there, and then we send work type, and then here we send just on work completed. So that's basically how we create events, how we tie them to the delegates, how they can be useful, because look, we can, out of this method which is void now, we can send numerous different functionalities out. based on the data that's being passed in. So it's very dynamic and very, I can see how this can be very useful in programming. So let's look at the rest of the notes here. So here all we said is that the best way to raise the event is to take the event name and add on to it and create a method like I demonstrated in the code. Like I said, it could be raised here. Also, we don't have to use on, but it's commonly used in .NET framework. And this is a delegate way of raising the event. And then of course we have now the newer syntax of invoking this, just like a one line. We don't have to write all these lines of code. So that's basically how we create the events and raise the events and using delegates.